Hey everybody, welcome back to the SuperBake podcast. I'm your host, Baker. Let's talk about stuff. Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. So, I wanted to do an episode earlier, but my AC went out. It's been out for the last week or so. I finally got it turned back on a couple days ago, but the last few days have been pretty brutal. I mean, fortunately, where I'm at, the temperature has been lower. It's been like in the 70s and 80s, so that's not too bad. But when it first went out, it was like in the 90s, so that definitely sucked. Definitely glad to have it back on. Fortunately, I was able to borrow a window unit from a friend, so that definitely saved my ass, because otherwise I probably wouldn't have gotten any sleep. But I wanted to record this, but it was kind of tough to do that in the blistering heat. It was just like an oven in my house, so I decided to just wait until the AC was back on. So tonight, I've got two reviews I'm going to give you. One is going to be for the new Horizon film, directed by Kevin Costner, and then I'm also going to do my review for the Longlegs scary film starring Nicolas Cage. So these are going to be just two kind of firing from the hip reviews. Not much, I don't really have any notes written down. I'm just going to kind of give my brief thoughts on them, try to keep these reviews succinct and short if I can. Of course, I am going to talk about the stories, so there may be some spoilers in here, so consider this your warning if you haven't seen either film yet and you don't want them spoiled for you. I'll start first with Horizon. So this is Horizon and American Saga Chapter 1, which came out a couple weeks ago. This is directed, co-written, produced, and also stars Kevin Costner. So that should probably be some indication to you as to how much he cares about this. This has been a passion project of his apparently since like the late 80s. I guess this has been just a film that he's wanted to get off the ground for a long time, but just it never materialized, either because of financial reasons or whatever. So I went into this movie. I was pretty excited about it. I've really gotten into Western films lately. I like the more modern Western films. Like I love films like Open Range, Tombstone, Lonesome Dove. I bring up Lonesome Dove because this film reminds me a lot of that film series. Horizon is supposed to be part of a 4-part film series, and that's what Lonesome Dove was. It was a 4-part series starring Robert Duvall that came out in 1989, I believe. Of course, one major difference is that one was based off of a book, if I'm not mistaken, whereas Horizon, to my knowledge, is not. But yeah, this has been something that Costner's been wanting to get done for a long time. Apparently, he put like, I think something like $35 million of his own money into financing this film. And also, too, he apparently left the show Yellowstone to work on this. So yeah, this is something that he's definitely been wanting to make happen for a long time. So we got the first installment, which came out in June. Chapter 2 was supposed to come out in August, but apparently that got pulled indefinitely because apparently the first film hasn't done very well in the box office. I don't think it's made quite that much money, not for the budget that it had. I can't remember what the budget was on it. I can look that up real quick. Okay, so the first movie looks like the budget was $50 million, and as of right now, it looks like it's grossed about $32 million. So, yeah, not great. And so because of that, they basically pulled the release on the second film, which is unfortunate. I think now Chapter 1 is supposed to be on Netflix, so hopefully that'll help maybe get it more profit and maybe get better reviews. That's the other thing, too, is I think Chapter 1's been getting kind of not so great reviews. I think they've been kind of all across the board. Some have been really good, praising it. Others have been kind of nasty. So I'll give my thoughts on it. But just briefly, I'm going to go over the story, or stories, plural. So I mentioned Lonesome Dove earlier, and the reason I mentioned that is because this film feels very similar to that. It feels almost like the spiritual successor to Lonesome Dove. Lonesome Dove was about several different stories that take place. This one feels very much the same. As far as the setting goes, this is supposed to take place, I believe, before and also during the American Civil War. And it basically follows 3 main stories. One of the stories revolves around Sam Worthington's character from Avatar. He plays, I think, a colonel in the Union Army who's stationed at this outpost. His character takes in this widow played by Sienna Miller, who her and her daughter survive this attack by this Apache tribe that attack the people of Horizon because they consider them outsiders that have invaded their land. And Her and her daughter survive this very brutal, like 20-minute long attack by the Apache tribe. Yeah, this attack, it's one of the few action scenes in the film, and it's brutal. Like, the film doesn't pull any punches in this. Like, you see like women and children getting killed. It's nothing gory or over the top, but it's pretty brutal. Costner definitely doesn't shy away from the violence in this scene. One of the soldiers that works for Sam Worthington is also played by Michael Rooker, who I feel like fits right in this movie. He's been in other westerns too. Like, I know he was in Tombstone, and he feels right at home in this film. He's trying to do like this Irish accent sort of, which feels kind of weird. It almost kind of sounds like Merle Dixon from The Walking Dead trying to do an Irish accent. So that's kind of interesting. But basically that's one story. Another story focuses on Luke Wilson's character, who is leading this group of people down this wagon trail in the Santa Fe Valley, and they're basically on their way to Horizon, and on their journey they're being watched by a group of Native Americans who are keeping an eye on them. And the third story revolves around Kevin Costner's character. Kevin Costner plays this character named Hayes, who comes to this small town. He befriends this woman named Marigold, who's a prostitute in that town. She's taking care of this baby that this woman that she's staying with, played by Jenna Malone, Jenna Malone's character, gets mixed up with like this group of, I guess they're outlaws or just kind of these really shady characters. She shoots one of the leaders and then takes the baby for herself. And then basically the baby and the prostitute, Marigold, end up in Kevin Costner's care when he gets into a gunfight with one of the sons in that gang. The son played by Jamie Campbell Bower, who played Vecna from Stranger Things. Spoiler alert, Kevin Costner kills Vecna in a gunfight, and then the two have to flee for their lives to get away from that group of outlaws. Those are the three main stories in the film. Although Kevin Costner's story doesn't really come in until about halfway through, which I thought was interesting. I just kind of figured since he was the director of the film and one of the stars, I kind of thought we were going to be seeing more of him in this movie. And since the movie is like 181 minutes long, so it's just over 3 hours, that means you're basically sitting there for about an hour and a half before you even really get to see like the third main story in this. So yeah, like I said, it's very similar to Lonesome Dove. Like in Lonesome Dove, there's also different stories going on. Like there's the main story with Robert Duvall and Tommy Lee Jones's characters, but then there's also this story with these other characters that eventually they all kind of combine into the same story near the end. But there's like all these different characters, and they all kind of have their own things going on, their own adventures. That's what this movie feels like. One of the criticisms I keep seeing about Horizon from a lot of people is that the pacing feels kind of slow. The only issue I have with that criticism is that this is supposed to be the first part of a 4-part series. And what I feel like this movie is doing is it's setting the groundwork for what's to come later. There's literally a scene at the end of this where we see a trailer for part 2, where it shows clips of, several scenes that take place in the next film. Or at least I assume it's part 2. I think they've actually filmed the first 3 movies at this time, so it could be scenes from the third film as well. I don't know, but if I had to guess, I would say it's the second one. So, yeah, a lot of character arcs aren't resolved in this. Like there's a scene with Michael Rooker's character where he has this crush on this older woman, and we kind of get a little bit of that, but it doesn't really feel like it goes too far. Again, we get some romance between Sam Worthington's character and Sienna Miller, but again, we don't really get to see the resolution of that. It sets up like this big confrontation in Luke Wilson's story where there's these two characters that are spying on like this kind of uptight British lady, and they catch her bathing naked, and then Luke Wilson has to go confront them about it, but it's never resolved. It's just kind of left open-ended. Well, I am assuming that those are things that are going to play major parts in future installments. So to me, what this film is really doing is it's setting the groundwork for probably bigger moments and larger conflicts that are going to come in the sequels. Like it's introducing us to the characters, because there's quite a few characters in this movie. There's a lot of actors and actresses in this. I was actually pretty surprised at just how many there were. Like I found myself just recognizing people in this film. Like one actor that I recognized was Angus McFadden. I hope I'm pronouncing his last name correctly. He's an actor who played Robert the Bruce in Braveheart. I was drawing a blank on the movie. And then he also was in Turn, Washington Spies. He's got a very small part in this film. He's like in the beginning of it, but like I immediately recognized his face as soon as I saw him. So yeah, like there's a lot. I was very surprised at a lot of actors that were in this movie. I believe the cinematographer for this film, I can't remember his name, but I think he also worked on Open Range with Kevin Costner. Let me double check. Cinematography was J. Michael Monroe. Hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Yeah, he did the cinematography for Open Range, I believe. So yeah, and that's something else I want to talk about too, is just like the sweeping landscapes in this movie. Like Kevin Costner, I believe they filmed most of this film in Utah, and he definitely uses the beautiful landscapes to his advantage in this. This definitely looks and feels like the Old West to me. But yeah, like just overall, like I really liked this movie. It's not perfect. I mean, it's got some issues here and there. Like not all the characters are particularly like that interesting. Like Kevin Costner's character, like I think a lot of this can be attributed to Costner's like acting abilities. Like I do believe Kevin Costner is a talented filmmaker and director. I just don't think he's a particularly good actor. He just always feels very dry in every role that he's in. In this movie, his character feels the exact same as the character from Open Range. I feel like you could take the two of them and switch the movies and you would never be able to tell the difference. Everybody else, I think, does fine in their respective roles. I think Jenna Malone probably gives the best performance out of everybody. Even Luke Wilson, I was actually surprised at how good his performance was. He's kind of this gruff leader, like he's kind of mean to the British couple, but at the same time, you get where he's coming from. He's a survivor, and he's trying to keep these people alive, and he knows that the odds are against them. So you kind of understand like why he is kind of a jerk to people. So those are probably the two performances that stuck out the most to me. Everybody else is fine. If I had to nitpick on the acting, I would say the only character in the film that I felt out of place was Jamie Campbell Bower, or Jamie Bower Campbell, whichever order his name's in. He plays one of the villains, and he just doesn't fit the role of this film. To me, he doesn't have that same gruff look that a lot of the other characters have. Like Sam Worthington fits this type of role. Luke Wilson fits this type of role. So does Kevin Costner. But Vecna just doesn't. Every time I see him, I just keep thinking like, that's Vecna. That's Vecna from Stranger Things. So it's not that it was distracting. He just felt kind of out of place to me. But other than that, I felt like everybody else was pretty good in their respective roles. I don't really have much criticisms in terms of the acting. I love the cinematography. As far as like the actual pacing of the film, again, I thought it was fine. It's kind of long. I don't know. I think it flows fairly well. Like I never found myself bored despite it being a 3-hour movie. Like there was never a moment where I kept thinking like, okay, are we close to the end? I don't know. Overall, I really enjoyed this film. To me, this felt like a return to like that classic Western film that maybe you might have seen from like the 60s or the 70s. It felt like this was Kevin Costner's callback to those types of films. So I really enjoyed it in that respect. And just the fact that it has that little teaser for what's to come in the next installment, that had me excited. Like I'm genuinely interested in seeing the next one. That's why I really hope that this does well enough that we get to see all 4 of them. I think the final 2 films are supposed to, at least right now, they're supposed to come out in 2025. So we'll see. Hopefully this does well enough that we get to see those releases. But for my money, I really enjoyed this film. I think it does a good job of setting up all the pieces for the next 3 installments, and I really want to see where Kevin Costner takes this. So if I had to give this a letter grade, I guess I would say probably a solid B+. Just a really good all-around Western film. If you like Lonesome Dove, I think you'll enjoy this film fine. I think, in my opinion, I have a theory about this. I think maybe part of the reason why this film, or at least part of the reason why this film is not getting great reviews is because, like I said, this feels more like a classic Western, and I don't know how well those types of movies translate in this day and age. I know there's other criticisms people have made about this movie, but I don't know. For my money, I think it's really good. I enjoyed it, and I recommend checking it out if you get the chance. So next, I'm going to talk about Longlegs, the new horror film starring Maika Monroe and Nicolas Cage. I've been interested in seeing this movie for quite some time now. I talked about the trailer, I believe, in a previous episode. The trailer was very creepy to me, like the teaser trailer that has like the father talking on the phone. That was to me one of the most effective teaser trailers that I've seen in a long time. So I was excited to watch this film. Got the chance to see it earlier this week, so I'm going to give my thoughts on that. The film was directed by Osgood Perkins, who I'm not really super familiar with. Kind of looked up his filmography. Stars Maika Monroe, Blair Underwood, Alicia Witt, and Nicolas Cage as the killer known as Longlegs. So just going to go over the story very briefly. The story focuses around Maika Monroe's character. She plays an FBI agent named Lee Harker, who appears to, at least from what I can tell in the story, she appears to have maybe some form of clairvoyance. Like, she seems to be very in tune with like details and cases. Like, she seems to know like where people are. Like, there's a scene in the movie where she just knows like the killer is in this house, like this killer that they're trying to track down. And they give her all kinds of tests, and then it's determined that she appears to maybe be psychic or maybe have some kind of psychic ability to her. She is put on this case trying to track down this killer who goes by the alias Longlegs. This is a decades-long murder case in which the killer goes to families' houses, delivers dolls to them, and then the families end up being killed in a murder-suicide by the fathers, who apparently become possessed by some kind of weird entity. And the only thing they seem to have in common is that the dolls appear in all their homes that are created by the killer Longlegs. Right off the bat, I want to say this film does a really good job of building up dread. This is definitely scary, but not in the sense of like most movies like The Conjuring are. The Conjuring to me is scary, but it also has a lot of jump scares. And I don't know if I've said this before on the podcast. Jump scares to me are okay. They can be effective, but I don't like an overuse of them. I don't like it when films rely on them too much, and I'm happy to say this film really does not. There are a couple jump scares in here, but they're they're effective. I think they're used well enough in the story. But overall, what the story does, or what the movie does, is it builds up dread throughout the entire runtime. This is one of those movies that's going to make you feel really uncomfortable throughout the entire thing. It reminded me of Hereditary in that way, but very different, of course. One of the things that they marketed this movie as was that it was supposed to be like another Silence of the Lambs, and there is a little bit of that in this, at least for the first 2/3 of the film. But then it kind of goes into kind of satanic cult territory, and I'll kind of get into that here in a little bit. Like, I love Silence of the Lambs. That's one of my all-time favorite horror films, so that kind of got me really interested in this. And the film is basically divided up into 3 parts, and for the first 2 parts, I was really invested in what was going on. I really cared about the characters. It's a pretty small cast of characters. It mainly focuses on Lee Harker, Nicolas Cage's character, Lee Harker's boss, and then her creepy mother named Ruth. And the mom in this story reminded me a lot of the mom from Carrie. Just really creepy, kind of this... She's like this religious shut-in, kind of a hoarder, lives in this really kind of nasty house. It's just kept like all of Lee Harker's childhood things just lying around. I kept getting like vibes from the mother from Carrie. In the entire movie, I kept thinking like, okay, she's the bad guy. She's got to, or at the very least, she's got to be connected to him. And I'll kind of go into that here in a little bit. But yeah, like the sense of dread this movie gives you throughout the entire runtime, I think was very effective. Like there's this one scene where Lee Harker's character, she's at home and she lives like in this, it's kind of this log cabin sort of out in the middle of the woods, and just it's this really dark environment that she's sitting in, and the entire time you're just really on edge because you keep thinking like, okay, is somebody in the house with her? Because the way the film is shot, there's a lot of like these wide angle camera shots where the main character is usually like in the center of the frame, and everything else around them, it almost kind of feels like is out of focus, but the characters are in focus. I don't know if that was on purpose, like if that was like a choice by the cinematography, but to me, it really worked. There are scenes in this movie, again, like when Lee Harker's in her house, where she's just sitting there, and the camera is focused on her, but all around her you can see like all these openings, like you can see like these open doorways. Like there's this scene where she's sitting there and you see her house behind her, and the entire time I kind of just kept thinking like, okay, is Longlegs in there, and is he gonna come get her? And so there's a lot of moments like that. Just the wide angle camera shots in this film I think work very effectively, and most of the time, nothing happens. It's just characters talking or an investigation going on, and nothing happens. There's no jump scare. but it just works because it just keeps making you feel tense for the main character. You keep thinking like, okay, is something going to jump out and attack her? I feel like something is going to happen here soon, and then it just never does. There's never like that sense of relief, which I really appreciated. It's also revealed kind of later in the film that Lee Harker kind of has like this connection to the killer. Like there's this opening scene in the film where it's revealed that it's her as a little kid and she encounters the killer at her childhood home. And that plays into the story later on. But yeah, overall, like I really enjoyed this film. Like it's, especially compared to Horizon. Horizon is such a bright movie because it takes place in the West. This is a much darker film, not just like in the figurative sense, but literally. There's a lot of dark, poorly lit areas in this film, like Lee Harker's home. Comparatively speaking, it feels like such a darker movie. The only issue, I guess the major issue that I have with this film, like I feel like it's very well acted. The pacing is really good. It does a good job of giving you a sense of dread and keeping you genuinely invested in what's going on. I really enjoyed it, and I really wanted to love it more than I did, but I do have some issues with it. And that mainly falls on the last third of the film. This isn't a major problem that I have with the film. It's just something that for me personally did not jive. I mentioned before that the film kind of goes into like a satanic cult. So it's going to be hard to talk about this without basically giving away the ending of the movie. So I've kind of spoiled a lot of it up to this point, but if you don't want to know how it ends, then I would stop listening right now because I'm going to basically tell you everything that happens at the end of the film. Or at the very least, I'm going to talk about the major story beats. So it's revealed that Lee Harker does have a connection with the killer. She encountered him when she was a kid, and he basically forced her mother to work for him, delivering the dolls that he creates. And the dolls that he creates, he puts like some kind of weird black magic in them or something, some kind of evil force. And whenever they're delivered to the families, that force basically possesses the father and forces him to kill the family and then kill himself. And so Lee's mother, Ruth, has been, ever since she was a kid, she's basically been working with him, delivering those dolls to the family in exchange for Longlegs not killing her and her daughter. So that basically reveals the connection between Lee and the killer, who it seems like he's, even throughout the film, it definitely feels like he has this connection to her. It feels like that's what the film is hinting at. This is where the film, for me, gets into really weird territory where I don't know how I feel about it. Like, up until this point, I was really enjoying it. I liked the FBI investigation aspect of it. I liked that it had this connection to, or it felt like a newer version of Silence of the Lambs. Once it gets into the occult stuff, that's where I sort of fell off. It's not that I didn't like it necessarily. It's just that I don't know how well it works for me personally. Like, it's really strange because like up until this point, we don't really see like, it's kind of hinted that maybe there's some supernatural elements going on with the killer, but then like in the last third, it's pretty much all but confirmed like, oh, okay, yeah, then they do have some kind of satanic black magic that they're using. And at that point, I was sort of like, oh, really? That's what we're doing? And then it's revealed that Ruth, Lee's mother, is also working with the killer, and she's also evil. There's a scene where she takes out Ruth's superior officer, and then she goes to Ruth's boss's house, and they basically try to take out her family, or her boss's family. It ends in this really tragic like gunfight at the end of the movie. That was where the film really kind of lost me. Like everything up until that point, when it was more grounded in reality, I was totally on board. And personally, I think I would have liked it more if they had stuck with that. And instead of just outright just stating that there's a supernatural element to the killer, maybe just kind of hinting at it instead, it turns out, okay, he is involved with a satanic cult, and he's been working with Lee's mother this whole time. And yeah, I don't know. For me, I wasn't super crazy about that. Also, there's a part where it reveals that he's been living in Ruth's basement through all these years. Now, it's established that Lee and her mother haven't been very close, but it seems odd that Lee's an FBI agent and she has all this attention to detail. Wouldn't she, assuming she had gone to visit her mother at some point, wouldn't she have noticed something out of the ordinary? I don't know. that was kind of a question I had at the end of it. But yeah, overall, like that, the last third of the film for me was sort of, I don't know, I don't want to say disappointment, but I wasn't super crazy about it. I think I would have liked it if it just stayed more grounded in reality and kind of left maybe more of the explicitly supernatural elements out of it. To me, it worked without having it in there. I liked the idea of Longlegs just being this creepy guy who maybe he has an accomplice, or maybe he has this kind of influence over people that can't be explained, and it's never really fully revealed. I don't know, when they just explain it with just magic, it just seems sort of, for me, I wasn't crazy about it. So yeah, story-wise, I would say it's pretty strong up until the last third for me personally. I really don't want this to sound like I didn't like the film. I really enjoyed this movie. I do think this is going to be one of those scary films that may not jive with everybody. I think some people may watch this and think that this is boring. For me, I personally really enjoyed it. I like the sense of dread that it builds up throughout the entire runtime. It's superbly acted. Maika Monroe is, in my opinion, I think she's quickly becoming one of the best actresses, like one of the best young actresses in Hollywood. She's fantastic in It Follows, and she is just as good, if not better, in this movie. Like, I absolutely loved her performance. And Nicolas Cage, gotta give props to the guy. If I didn't know that was him in this movie, I never would have guessed. When I listen to him talk, it almost does kind of sound like him a little. Supposedly he based his performance, I guess, off of his mother, is what he said in an interview. Boy, he has a terrifying mother, then. That's all I'm gonna say. If depending on how accurate this performance is. As far as how he looks, you may have seen glimpses of him in the trailer. This crossed my mind, and now I can't get it out of my head. He makes me think of Jon Voight, kind of, the way his face looks in this movie. It's like it's like this puffy face, and he wears like this white makeup, almost like doll makeup, which I guess is appropriate since he makes dolls, and he's got like this long, kind of like scraggly white or blonde hair and stuff like that. And just like the way he talks, he's very erratic. There's scenes like where he sings almost kind of like a heavy metal or hair metal band. Like there's parts where you see like posters of heavy metal groups like in the basement he's staying in, and like his performance is very strange. It kind of, for me, it kind of walks that line between being silly and over the top, but also being terrifying. Mostly it's terrifying. It's Nicolas Cage, I think, really having fun with being just a complete psychopath in this movie, but he is genuinely creepy. Like, this is a guy you would not want to run into. So yeah, like I thought he was fantastic too, but I would definitely say Maika Monroe is probably the standout performance for me in this movie. I think she's just fantastic. I think she carries this film. She's in basically every scene, and for good reason. She definitely gives a fantastic performance in this film. So yeah, just overall, my thoughts on this movie. I really enjoyed it. Again, I wasn't super crazy about the supernatural, satanic, black magic stuff. The last third of the movie was probably where it really kind of fell off for me personally. I'm sure some people are going to disagree with me on that. That's just how I felt about it. But the acting is superb. It doesn't over-rely on jump scares. It's just, it gets you just through sheer tension and just an ever-growing sense of dread, and just never really lets you relax throughout the entire runtime. And it's also not 3 hours long like Horizon, so fortunately this is a much shorter, easier to digest film. So if I had to give this one a letter grade, probably about the same as Horizon, a solid B+, maybe an A-. I think for me, the last third personally kind of keeps this from being a higher ranked A, but still a fantastic, scary movie, and definitely gets, a big recommendation from me. I think this is definitely one that's worth checking out. All right, everyone, I think that's going to conclude tonight's episode. Once again, if you like what you heard, I am on Anchor, Spotify, and YouTube. Please feel free to like, share, and subscribe, and I'll catch you all next time. Later.